high performers go through a shift in energy. They might do deep work, and then you're going to be in social environments. So think of people who travel around the world. They have engagement, they have social events, things that they do. And then there's other times where you need to do that deep work, where there can be a sense of isolation, but you really need to knock out the hard work, the challenges in your business, in your personal life. And it's a big mental shift. And that can be challenging and also confusing for people. So if you're in an environment where you're having a lot of fun, you're socializing, you're into that, you get addicted to that state, but then you realize that you actually have to come down to reality at some point, and there's deep work that needs to be done. Now, some people will gravitate towards one or the other, and they try to get addicted to either being in that high energy state, the high energy environment, or they can recluse and isolate. But also what I see is that there's just different phases that you'll go through. This might even be throughout the year and then throughout your life based on where you are. So what I've seen is during the winter, we often see people tend to like kind of hibernate more. You know, they're inside, maybe there's more family activities, and it depends on how your life is set up, you know. Do you have a lot of people at home, or do you live alone? And finding a way to not necessarily balance this, what I see is high performers, they go through extremes. So there might be an extreme go, 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 go phase where you're either traveling, you're doing events, you're out with people, all of those things. And there's so many changing areas where you're meeting new people, you have all these ideas, they're flooding in, all that's happening. And then at some point, there's a shift where you have to do deep work. Maybe it's accounting or taxes are due, or you have some business challenge or problem that happens, and you have to really sink in deep to, you know, isolate yourself to work on whatever challenge or problem it is for you. And what I've seen is that if you get really good at context switching here, it can make you a real high performer. The challenge is that, you know, going from a high energy state where you're out at events, you're having fun, there's an addiction there to, you know, all of that excitement, and then going into being like a monk. And if you get good at controlling your brain and also just acknowledging that it's going to be different now for a period of time, and to ease into that state, to just get your mind into that state, whether it be for the entire day or if you know it's going to be for a few weeks, but reminding yourself that you can always come back to those other things. They will be there. The thing is, once you sink deep into that state, once you are in that state of the monk Zen-like feeling where you are thinking now deeply about things, it becomes much harder to communicate and be energetic and do all the entertaining, extroverted social things that you were doing. You're almost disconnected with that world. It's a different wavelength that you are in. It actually really is a different brain wavelength that you've entered into. And that can happen for short periods of time, or, you know, if let's say you're doing deep research, you're a PhD mathematician, you're gonna work yourself into that for a long period of time. So over weeks and months, that's gonna be your default state. And, you know, maybe you're born that way more, or your work or your environment forces you more into that. And so you're gonna resist wanting to go into different energetic states because you're going to get comfortable with whatever that new default baseline is. So that's something to be aware of. And then a way to shift or change out of it is you can either ease yourself or try to force yourself. So if you've been studying all day, if you've been working at home and you want to go out for an event or something, it can really help just by pumping up some music, you know, just moving, talking, externalizing. It's an activity I actually like to do, is just to start talking out loud, you know, if you can. Because when you have these ideas and these thoughts inside of your head, it's very different than when you're actually communicating them out to the world, to people. And what you think is going to come out can be very different. So it just helps, you know, if you're advanced and this isn't an issue for you, you can switch quickly. Some people can switch quickly between states. Other people, they have a much longer transition. So you should identify what type of person you are within that and use that within your high performance lifestyle to accommodate for it. I like to plan for this, knowing that for me, it can take longer to transition. Because sometimes I just get deeply ingrained if I'm learning a new technology like artificial intelligence, or I'm diving deep into cybersecurity, or I'm doing music marketing and management, or I'm creating a new song. I get fully immersed in that. And it's hard to like, okay, let's pull out and shift onto something new now, work on something different. But then there's other times where you might relate to this if you procrastinate and you're just doing a lot of like light work where you're just kind of hopping around, you're doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you're looking at your calendar, you're sending a few messages to people, but you're not really sinking your teeth into the actual work. And that's a way of avoidance. But for a high performer, what you should realize is that you have different times of the day, different times of the week, month, the year, whatever it might be, where you're going to be better at certain types of work. So if you can identify that, you can really leverage that for yourself and your lifestyle. It's a very valuable thing to do. And so what I've started to do is to become more attuned to the natural rhythms of life and how I'm feeling, and accept it and say, okay, this is more of a time for me to do this type of work or to be involved in this type of thing. And there's always time for this other thing. Now, it depends on how urgent you are and what your focus is. If you have a new startup, a new business, you're going to be thrown into the fire and you're going to have to fight against it. It's going to be pushing against whatever state you want to work with. But see, you're going to adapt that new state. And I think that's also an addiction. I see this with entrepreneurs and high performers as well. They get addicted just to the chaos, the insanity, and in some ways it can actually be not beneficial because you're just purposely throwing yourself into situations that are they're chaotic, and you're staying busy. Like, you're keeping yourself super, super busy about things when it might actually be beneficial if you took a step back, went for a walk, a long walk, or went in nature and thought about, reassessed what you're actually doing. Because if you're just constantly busy, you're being reactive and you're not taking a second to step back and actually be strategic. And we need that throughout the year. At least a few times throughout the year, at minimum once, to really step back, I'd say for at least a few days, and just let your mind be in a state of thinking. I use this with long walks. I like to go on long walks and not bring any electronics. And what I'll find is when I'm so wired up and juiced up from social media, videos that I've been watching, ideas, all the things that I've been working on, my mind is just racing with all these ideas. And it can take sometimes even 2 or 3 hours of walking for all of that to unravel. And so what I usually do is when I start on that walk, I just let it go. I just let my mind wander. And that is a skill that sometimes people have forgotten because they're just clicking on other things that are taking your attention as opposed to letting your own mind wander with what you already know. So I just let my mind unravel. If I'm having all these thoughts that I'm thinking, I let it go. I just think about all these things, and then it slowly starts to slow down a little bit over time. And then I start to focus in on what are really the most important things that I should be thinking about? After I've let my mind wander, I might stumble upon an idea that's worth thinking about, and I'll linger on that. If it's just kind of random, if it seems anxious, I might, stop myself, as I was saying, and say, what are the most important thing, or what is the most important thing that I need to think about or be working on? And it's really powerful when you let your mind settle and relax, and then it's time to you're walking. Now you can't go click on web pages, you can't look at your phone to try to get more information. Think about what it is that you need to work on and spend some time just focused on that individual concept only with what you have in your mind. And you'll have to make a mental map and think about it for an extended period of time of, okay, are there things that I need to look up once I do have time? What are the things that I need to work on first? What are the short-term things, the long-term areas, all of that, and relying only on your brain. And the more time you spend on it, then it will solidify and you'll come to a more clear idea of what are the next things I actually need to work on. So that's a really powerful practice, and anyone should be able to do that if you can just get access to go walk without any electronics. And then ideally you would want to go in a less chaotic environment where you can have less stimuli and just focus and be by yourself. That's why I love to go into the mountains, even though I live in the city, and I will do this periodically just to cleanse the mind. And it's amazing to be in nature and what it can do. So there's a few thoughts for you, that you'll see between going into high energy, chaotic environments when you're on the go doing all that, to when you need to go into more of a deep thought state, and in these in-between transitions. And the more high performant you are and the practice you do with it, you can identify that, and then you can switch quickly between them to be more efficient. So if you like this, go ahead and subscribe. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts or anything differing than what I said, but I'll see you in the next video.